Hello, welcome to the Talk Football Podcast. I'm your host, Todgy, and we are doing a live Q&A. We're live on YouTube, and we are live on TikTok. YouTube, TikTok. So, basically, all I want you to do, anyone that jumps in the live chats, you can drop any football-related questions you like in there, and I will answer them. I also have a series of questions that have already been sent in by the listeners and questions from the listeners. So we've got 5 questions all lined up, ready to answer from our listeners that are already. And yeah, so we're going to start with a question from Paul Nelson, who's also one of the regular hosts that joins the show. His question is, can Arsenal win the league? That's a bloody good question. I think their squad is a little bit thin, if I have to be honest with it. I'm not sure if they get 1 or 2 injuries to key players that they can sustain it to the end of the season. But who knows? Who knows? I mean, if they lose Jesus, to be honest, he's not really been, hasn't really been scoring many goals. So Jesus hasn't really been scoring many goals of late. I think it's now 9 games that he hasn't scored. I would imagine that they'd probably be looking maybe to add another forward in January. Trouble is who do they get? I mean, I know I'm going to touch on Ronaldo in a bit. I know Piers Morgan would like Ronaldo at Arsenal, but I don't think that's ever a possibility. I don't see that happening at all. I don't think that's anywhere close to being on the cards. So, can Arsenal win the title? Yes, they can. I think they're a shoe-in for the top 4. I don't believe overall. Oh, yeah, there we go. We have a comment from one of our viewers. Jesus is really good. I don't think Nketiah... Well, yeah, I mean, he's mentioned Nketiah. I don't think Nketiah really has the quality. I think he obviously has a work rate. He has a good work rate. I don't think Eddie Nketiah is going to get... As it stands, currently, I don't think Eddie Nketiah is going to get 20 goals a season. And I think that's what Arsenal need long term, maybe to help Jesus, go with Jesus. I don't think Jesus is a typical sort of 20 goal a season striker, although his work rate and what he does for the team is phenomenal. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the World Cup, and if their players that are playing in the World Cup pick up injuries, and see how they come back after the World Cup, and it really depends, I suppose, on what the board do with January. If they decide they really want to have a go for it and go out and sign people in January, then I think they can. But I mean, City are going to be incredibly hard to topple. I think, barring, I mean, even if they lose Haaland for a number of games, they've still got more than enough in their squad to score goals. They score goals from all over the pitch, which is not really something Arsenal do. So, can Arsenal win the title? Yes. A second part of the question from Paul is, who makes the top 4? Now, that's a really interesting one. I change my mind weekly on that. I don't know. I tipped Newcastle at the start of the season on a podcast episode, and people thought I was a bit mental. And now they're sitting top 3. Was I that mental? Who knows? I don't think I was. Well, listen, Newcastle, I liked what they did. I liked what they bought with the players that they bought. I think Newcastle can sneak in. And I said this to a few people. Now, I'm a Chelsea fan, and we'll talk about Chelsea in a bit on one of the questions. I honestly, and people think I'm mad, I don't think Chelsea and Liverpool make the top 4. So I'm going to say City or Arsenal win the title. Probably more lean towards City on that one. I think Conte, despite the football not being great, I think Conte gets Tottenham in the top 4 and I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to give Newcastle a shout on that. So I'm going to say my top four, varying orders, whichever way it ends up. But I think the top four will be City, Arsenal, Spurs, and Newcastle. I feel that there's something building at Newcastle, and it ain't just about that they can spend ridiculous amounts of money. I think Eddie Howe is clearly being listened to at that club, and and he's building it in the right direction. And their curve is just not like up there, but their curve is like nice. They're graduating towards where they want to be. Perhaps maybe a little bit quicker, maybe than they anticipated. But there's a lot of teams that are in the Premier League that you may have thought would have been aiming around sort of top 4, top 6, and that they're having a bit of a struggle this season. Chelsea being one of them, Liverpool being another. I think a lot of maybe Man U fans thought that with Ten Hag in there that they might have had a push for top 4, and albeit they're not that far off. I just don't. I think with everything that's going on with Ronaldo and everything else, I think that will weigh heavy on them. And yet again, I don't think there's a massive amount of goal. I mean, Ronaldo scored 26 goals last season, and anyone else in the United team was close. So yeah, that's that one. I hope that answers your question, Paul. Paul, second question, and this is a little bit of a tough one for me. So it's how I feel about Chelsea and Potter, and will Chelsea fans have patience with Potter? It started off quite well. We went unbeaten in 5 or 6 games. The football weren't great, and we're fragile at the back. We are really fragile at the back. Which obviously under Tuchel we got used to having a real solid back line, but Rudiger was a big miss. You lose a player of Rudiger's quality, we're going to look a bit fragile. And yet again, same as like last season, we've lost Reece James, and now, and we've lost Ben Chilwell. So arguably our 2 first choice fullbacks, particularly Reece. Reece is obviously a first choice fullback. I believe he's the best right back in the country, if not one of the best right backs in Europe. And Ben Chilwell, he's good. Again, the pair of them can't seem to stay fit and consistent for a period of time. I think we need to give Potter time. Looking at what he did with Brighton, I like the way Brighton play. Good, hard-working players. Everyone works for the cause, for the team. At the moment, perhaps the players that we have in the Chelsea squad are not really capable of maybe doing what Potter requires of them, being flexible in the formation. It's been hard for me to see someone like Raheem Sterling being sort of like shunted out onto like a left wing back role at times. And I kind of get that, because we give him a lot of space on the left hand side, and if everyone shuffles and your team rotates on the pitch, other players drop out, drop in, it could put Sterling in a lot of space over there. But it's obviously a role that he's not particularly used to, probably isn't happy with, and his performance and form have struggled with that, where we've been constantly changing and shifting his position. Obviously, in attacking areas, we create a lot of chances. I know that sounds mad, but we ain't scored a lot of goals. And perhaps people thought that Aubameyang would be the answer to that. That hasn't worked out. So, yeah, I don't know. I think we have to give Potter time. I'm not so sure the rest of the Chelsea fans will be patient with that. It's like Paul's mentioned in his comment and his question, for the past 20 years, 19 years under Roman and whatnot, we've been used to continued success, and people may not agree with the ways that came about, spending a fair bit of money, obviously, and a culture of sacking a manager if the manager wasn't getting things right, and the club and the board level, Roman, if they felt that we weren't progressing in the right direction. They made a change, and invariably they got it right, because new managers would come in. We'd have a bit of a bounce for a couple of years or so, and we would pick up trophies. Mourinho twice in 2 different spells, Premier League. Ancelotti coming in, even Di Matteo coming in for a short spell, picking up a Champions League, and then of course Thomas Tuchel, who picked up a ridiculous amount of trophies in a short space of time. So I think it's tough. I really hope Potter succeeds, because I really, really like him. I like him as a coach. I like him, the way he is on the touchline. I liked the way Brighton set up in their teams, and you can see in Brighton as well, even under their new manager Zerbi, they're still playing literally the same way. He hasn't really tinkered, he hasn't changed much, and why would you? Because it's a formula that's been particularly successful. So I think, given a couple of transfer windows, we've got a couple of players in coming through from the academy that could do well. So we'll see. I hope he's given patience. From what they say, but obviously things can change. It appears that the board see this, the new owners see this as more of a long-term project. How that sits with the rest of the Chelsea fans, and maybe a fair few years without trophies. I don't know. We'll see. Right, this is a big one. So we're going to move on to Andy Reid's question, and it just simply says Ronaldo. Now I've watched the first part of the interview. I'm yet to. I was at work today, so I didn't have a chance to catch up and watch the second part. So I'm going to do that tonight. So I can only go by what I've seen so far. I'm a massive Ronaldo fan. People will talk about Messi, Ronaldo, and both obviously amazing, great players. But for me, I think Ronaldo is, complete superstar. And even at the age of 37, to have the hunger to still want to go out and play Champions League football. Man United can't provide that. So obviously he looked to leave in the summer, and that didn't come about. Everything that's happened since, he's obviously, if you haven't watched the full interview with him, I suggest you do. You can it's all free to watch on the Talk TV app. And like I say, I've only watched the first part, but he talked about where he lost his kid, and then everything else that was going on around him, and the criticism he was taking about, missing pre-season training, missing, leaving games and all that. When the guy, as incredible as he is, he's still only human, and he was going through something that no parent should have to go through. So I think people need to probably give the guy a break. I think perhaps the way he's done it is wrong. But then, how do you have your say unless you do it in the way he's done it? So I feel for the guy a little bit, really, and it's not about anything to do with money. I'm purely looking at this on a football level and a human level. This guy Ronaldo, despite what you think about work rate, can he press a ball? Has he still got the legs to do it? The guy scored 26 goals for Man United last season. You don't become a bad player in a couple of months. And clearly, people in and around the club have decided that he's not really of any much use to them anymore. So if that be the case, and this is all about just money now, and and how much Ronaldo is worth commercially or whatever, and that they want to get something for him, then I can understand why he's gone and done what he's done. This is going to force United's hand. It's going to force Ten Hag's hand. I don't think you'll see him in a United shirt again. I think that's it. That's done. So yeah, I will give you more feedback, Andy, once I've watched the second part of the interview, and perhaps we'll get you on and we'll have a Ronaldo pod and we'll talk about it. So that's that one. So we've got another question from Paul. which is which teams will benefit from the World Cup break and which teams won't. I'm going to start with the won'ts first of all, because I believe a lot comes from form and momentum. And obviously Arsenal, and particularly Newcastle, as I've mentioned, have had a lot of good form in this first part of the season, leading in before the World Cup break. I don't think either one of those clubs would be particularly happy now having to break that form, and you can never really tell whether or not they're going to come back after the World Cup and be in the same way again. You don't know what injuries are going to come out of it. Obviously, Newcastle probably haven't got as many players away on international duty as Arsenal, but still a fair few, So yeah, I think it will be disruptive to the teams that are in good form. But then the flip side to that is the teams that ain't doing so well. So I've written down obviously Southampton, Wolves, West Ham. Wolves have obviously brought in new manager in Lopetegui. Southampton as well, Nathan Jones. It's been a slow start to the season for David Moyes at West Ham, but they've had a few changes in personnel there in terms of players. A couple of players leaving the club. Like Mark Noble retiring. I think there was always going to come a stage for me when Mikel Antonio wouldn't be scoring as many goals as perhaps he did when he was at that little peak. So they've brought in Scamacca. And you've got to give that guy a bit of time, obviously, to get used to the Premier League. And so I think for the likes of Southampton, Wolves, West Ham, players that ain't away on international duty, it'll give the coaches time to work with them. It will, particularly, obviously, I think for Wolves and Southampton with Nathan Jones, because it'll give him chance, them two managers in particular now, a month to really settle into their clubs and feel like they belong. And yeah, so that's what I think. That's what I think about that. I do think, obviously, all clubs will probably look to strengthen and do something in January. I think both Arsenal and Newcastle were probably looking to sign someone in their forward areas. And Southampton and Wolves, West Ham, I don't see West Ham being down at the bottom. I think they'll get a bit of momentum after the World Cup. I think they'll get some wins under their belt, and I think they'll push up the table a little bit. So if West Ham fans, any West Ham fans out there listening, I wouldn't be too worried. I think you're obviously in good hands with David Moyes, and I think you will steadily carry on. You've already shown a little upturn in form in that, so I think that will continue. I think maybe you might get a few players back from injury, add one or two more. Southampton, on the other hand, though, I think I worry for them. It's a big shout putting Nathan Jones in charge. Going from where he's come from, maybe they're looking at it and drawing maybe sort of similarities between Nathan Jones and Potter and following the same kind of sort of theory. I don't know. It's a big jump though. No Premier League experience as a manager. And I know foreign managers come in and they have no Premier League experience, but they'll have top flight, mostly, they'll have top flight experience in the leagues that they've come from. So I think it's a bit different. But I think obviously, particularly Jones will try and infuse some kind of like higher work ethic at Southampton. And they've got some good young players. They've brought in a few young players from City this season, and of course they've got to bed in and get used to playing week in, week out in the Premier League, which they haven't done coming out of the City youth setup. So there is some potential there. I don't think it's all doom and gloom for Southampton, which my good friend Mr. Cotton will be happy to hear. And but I do think perhaps this could be the year that Southampton go. I do. But it's a shame because they're a nice club, and obviously my good friend Simon Cotton, he's a big Southampton fan. Often works there as a steward as well. So I hope for his sake that they stay up. All right, so we are moving on to the World Cup. And it's our fifth question, and it's from Adam. Who wins the World Cup? Do you know what? Before they got so many injuries, I went for France. But I mean, obviously they've just lost Nkunku. No Kante, no Pogba. That's two massive players out of their midfield. I don't know. I don't think France can do it. I'm not sure what they've got left over. So I'm going to go Brazil. I think a lot of people I spoke to are going for Brazil, and attacking wise, phenomenal. So I fancy the South American team for this. I wouldn't put it past Messi. I don't think there's a massive amount of quality in the Argentinian squad. There is quality, but not. They're not running amok with amazing attacking players. But you just wouldn't put it past Messi. Possibly his last major tournament, going out with a World Cup under his belt, which wouldn't make Ronaldo too happy. But there we go. Yeah. So yeah, I think I'm going to go for Brazil to win the World Cup. So we'll have a quick peek on the old socials here. I'll run you through the socials before we end the episode as well, because it's important to be able to get in contact with the show. So obviously, for those that are watching on either YouTube or TikTok, links are in the bio to the link tree, which links you into all of our social pages on the Instagram. You can even do it on the old-fashioned way and do an email if you like. So you can email the show at talkfootballpdc@gmail.com. So that's one way to get in contact. Like I say, but the link tree is your best way. Subscribing obviously on the YouTube channel so you can keep up to date with any little bits and pieces that go on there. And obviously following on TikTok as well. And for anyone that wants to be a guest on the show and you want to come on, if you've got something to say about your club or country as the World Cup's on, then just get in contact and we'll get you on. I do when I'm not doing this on my own, I'll do it via Zoom. So it's nice and easy. We get on Zoom, we have a chat, and we talk about the the topics you want to raise about your club or whatever. And then we go from there, and we have a chat for a good sort of like 30, 40 minutes or whatever, or however long it takes. Might take longer. And before you know it, you've done a podcast episode with me. So yeah, don't be afraid to get in contact with the show. I'd love to get fans from clubs outside of the Premier League, so be that in the EFL, be that in in any major leagues in Europe. So we're not just talking about people from the UK as well. I'd love to get a couple of Rangers and some Celtic fans on to have a bit of banter and a bit of a talk about that. And that's what we do. And I want to say make my apologies that it's been so long putting out an episode. But I've got a lot going on with work because this is not my full-time job. I do have a day job, and I've also recently moved house. So getting into the new place, setting everything up and getting settled in. So yeah, we apologise for that a few months break, but hopefully now everything's all settled. We're going to be doing a few more live shows. Hopefully Paul's going to be joining us from New Zealand. So we're going to have a catch up with Paul because we haven't had Paul on for a while. I know Andy, Mr. Andy Reid, is desperate to get on to talk about United and Ronaldo. And then, of course, we need to have a catch up with one of our co-hosts, Adam James, who's, to give us a bit of an update on how things are going at Derby. Yeah, so there we go. Thank you to all those people that jumped in, people that have left comments and questions. Really appreciate it. And thank you for joining me on the Talk Football podcast. I know this is only a sort of a short episode, but hey, we're back, and we're going to try and stay back and a little bit more regular. And I'm going to start gathering more questions over the next couple of weeks, and we'll do another Q&A episode as well. So yeah, thank you for joining me on the Talk Football podcast. I'm your host Todgy, and we'll catch you again very, very soon.